righteousness go. Come shine your light and let it shine. Let it shine on me. Let it shine on me. If the sun gon' shine, let it shine on we. Let it shine on us. We gon' shine on love. We gon' shine on love. We gon' shine on. We gon' shine on love. We gon' shine on love. We gon' shine on. We gon' shine on love. If the sun gon' shine, let it shine on me. Let it shine on me. If the sun gon' shine, let it shine on we. Let it shine on us. We gon' shine on love. We gon' shine on love. We gon' shine on. We gon' shine on love. We gon' shine on love. We gon' shine on. We gon' shine on love. We gon' shine on. We gon' shine on love. We gon' shine on. We gon' shine on love. We gon' shine on. We gon' shine on love. We gon' shine on. We gon' shine on love.
I speak of promised land, soil as soft as mama's hands, running water, standing still, endless fields of daffodils and chamomile, rice under black beans, walked in the apple with cracked screens and told prophetic stories of freedom, found warmth in a black queen for when I get cold like Nat King, I'm doing the dad thing. I speak of wondrous, unfamiliar lessons from childhood, make you remember how to smile good. I'm pre-currency, post-language, anti-label, pro-famous, I'm Broadway Joe Namath. Kanye's best prodigy. He ain't signed me, but he proud of me. I got some ideas that you gotta see. Make a vid with Shorty and they ship it like the Odyssey. They never seen a rapper practice modesty. I never practice, I only perform. I don't even warn. I don't need it warm. I won't be reborn. I speak to God in public. I speak to God in public. He keep my rhymes in couplets. He think the new shit jam. I think we mutual fans. I used to dance to Michael. I used to dance in high school. I used to pass out music. I still pass out music. The people's chant must be everything the people can be. I'm getting artsy fartsy, house full of some Hebrew Brandies. You must have missed the come up. I must be all I can be. Call me Mr. Mufasa. I had to master stampedes. I made it through, made it through, made it through. And everything I gave to you, I gave to you, I gave to you. You got it, you got it, you got it. It's coming, 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 coming. So are you ready? Are you ready for your blessing? Are you ready for your miracle? Are you ready for your blessing? Are you ready for your miracle? Are you ready for your blessing?
she's telepathic. Call it black or magic. Yeah, she scares the government. Deja vu atonement. We go missing by the hundreds. Everybody check the bus. Everybody check the bus. The camera loves us, Oscar doesn't. Everybody check the bus. Everybody they want us in the kitchen. Kill our sons with lynchings. We get loud about it. Oh, now we're the bitches. Look at what they did to my sister. Last century, last week. They put her body in a jar and forget her. They love how we repeat. Look at what they did to my sister. Last century, last week. They make her hate her own skin, treat her like a sin. But what they don't understand, but what they don't understand, but what they don't understand, see what they don't understand. See, she's telepathic, call it black or magic. Yeah, she scares the government. Deja vu atonement. She don't give up. Yeah, she don't give up. She don't give up. No, she don't give up. Rosa was a freedom fighter and she died as satisfied. Ella was a freedom fighter and she died as satisfied. Audrey was a freedom fighter and she died as satisfied. And Ella was a freedom fighter and she died as satisfied. So Jenna was a freedom fighter and she died as satisfied. Asaka was a freedom fighter and she died as satisfied. Rosa was a freedom fighter and she died as satisfied. Ella was a freedom fighter.
All right. Welcome everyone to session number 2 of Course Correction, focused on translocal strategies for a just recovery, a Black-led session on restoring land, labor, and capital to self-determined communities. My name is Abbas. For access needs, I will describe myself. I'm a 27-year-old Black male in a Black collared shirt, sitting in front of an illustration of a tribute to Malcolm X and Nipsey Hussle, and I will be your MC this afternoon. We appreciate everyone's flexibility as we all needed time to readjust and take care of each other during this intense moment. It has been painful to watch people that look like my family continuing to be shot, lynched, beaten with no justice and no sense of safety. With the combination of crisis, we are greeted with an incredible opportunity to lean into our visions of the world that we know we need. We understand that social inequity is a form of ecological imbalance that will inherently result in ecological erosion. If we are not in right relationship with each other, we cannot be in right relationship with the rest of the living world. With that, we are going to explore some North Star strategies through the Just Transition framework. A few quick updates. We open the chat for folks to use, but if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A box. I will pass it over to my colleague, Ellen Choi, to go over access needs.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Ellen. I use she and they pronouns. I'm a femme presenting Asian person with long hair, sitting in front of a white fireplace. Really glad to see everybody. I'm just gonna do some access, give some access information. And first we just wanna say that MG really sees disability and language justice as central to the fight to defend land and life. And our comrades in the disability justice world and community really teach us that this is not just about logistics, but that access is love. And this is the fight for disability justice is one and the same as the fight for ecological justice and climate justice and Black liberation. So this is a collective responsibility we want to put into practice, and we're trying stuff out and we're learning, so it also won't be perfect. So we always are open to receiving folks' feedback and suggestions after this session. We'll be sending out a survey for that. So I'm just gonna share how to access some of the services we're providing today. I'm gonna share my screen to show some slides about that. So first is the interpretation, the Spanish interpretation. And I want to thank Florencia Manoville and Andreina Maldonado, who will be interpreting today. I wanted to see if one of them is able to jump on to give the announcement of how to join the interpretation line.
Yes, I will say it in Spanish. Si hay alguien que está escuchando aquí en la línea y necesita traducción al español, por favor llame a la línea. Es una llamada gratuita y el número es 844-855-4444. De nuevo el número es 844-855-4444. Y el código de acceso es 169-6957. Nuevamente el código de acceso es 169-6957. Gracias.
Thank you so much. Next, I'm going to share about the ASL interpretation. So thank you to Juan Ramirez and Deb Taylor of Terps for Bay Area Resistance, who are going to be our ASL interpreters today. And we're going to just make sure that the interpreter stays on the screen at all times. And then just a reminder for folks, or maybe folks who might not know this, during screen share, when you're in full screen, like it could be now, the window might show in a very small window. So you can drag the corner to make that window larger if you need to. And last is live captioning. So we're also providing captions today. And so shout out to Jeanette Christian from 2020 Captioning, who's working right now on the captions. And if you're watching this in the Zoom, there is a closed caption icon in your Zoom controls, and you can change the size of the text using the instructions here, which is just clicking on that arrow and choosing subtitle settings. If you're watching in the Facebook Live, you can also turn captions on and off in the controls in the video window. Oh, and last but not least, I also wanted to shout out, we have a graphic note taker today, who's Yuki Kudokoro, who's a talented artist and also a staff member of the Climate Justice Alliance. So let me see if we could turn you up to turn on your video just to show folks that you're there. So thanks, Yuki, for that. We're going to try to show her work at some points during the session, and then definitely we'll be sharing the final version with folks afterwards. And then the recording of today's session and all following sessions, as well as transcripts and Spanish interpretation recordings, will be made available. All right, thanks, everybody. I'll pass it back to Abbas.
You're on mute.
I know. Can everybody see me? I'm having a little bit of issue with my Zoom account right now.
Yes, we can see you, Abbas. Thanks,
Okay.
and hear you.
I can't see anything on the screen. But the next person we have coming up to do our grounding, I have the honor of actually having her as a practitioner, is Mawu Lisa Thomas Adiembo, is a Louisiana-born Bay Area-based community healer, trauma specialist, somatics awakener, and body worker, ritualist, and song weaver dedicated to transformation and healing within oppressed communities. Lisa embodies a rich and electric background in earth-based spiritual advocacy work and the healing art with the focus on healing the impacts of historical racialized trauma, gender oppression, and sexual violence for herself and others. Lisa is currently a senior teacher, trauma healer, and somatics body worker and coordinating with BOLD, the Black Organizing for Leadership and Dignity. Generative Somatics and Strozzi Institution, and deeply committed to being in the path of somatic being, healing, and transformation, both relevant and accessible and serve in service to the Black liberation. With that, I will pass it over to Mawu Lisa.
Thank you so much, Abbas. Welcome, everyone. It is an honor to be here, an honor to be of service in this way. And I'm really excited. I'm in love with Movement Generation. I'm in love with everything that they do. And really the framework that they're putting forward, the vision that they have. And, you know, one of the things that Movement Generation really puts forward is for this world that we're trying to create, for this just transition, there's going to come a time when it really asks us to be in the position of governance. Yeah, like how, when we create these conditions, what is our role in leadership around governance? And what I know about governance is going to take us being deeply connected to our power. Governance is going to take us being deeply connected to our power. And we cannot connect to our power if we are not self-possessed. We cannot connect to our power if we are not self-possessed. So when I say self-possessed, I mean you're in you. You have access to the wisdom, the billions of years of evolutionary wisdom that's here in our bodies. So I'm going to invite folks to join me in a practice where we get to practice self-possession. We get to practice coming home to our bodies, coming home to this temple, coming home to this deep site of wisdom, of agency and power. So what I'm going to invite each and every one of you all to do is just take a moment and check in with yourself. Really turn your attention inward to your sensations and just notice at 3:18 p.m. Pacific, or whatever other time zone you're in, just notice, how has this day shaped me? What's happening in my jaw? What's going on right behind my eyes? How's my neck? What's going on in my shoulders? And just notice what sensations are here in your body right now. Getting present with sensations is such a fast and powerful way to come back home to yourself, because sensations are only happening in the present moment. They're not happening in the past. They're not happening in the future. So getting present for what's actually going on in this body temple. And then from here, I'm going to invite you, if you're seated, Whether you're seated, whether you're standing, or whether you're lying down, go ahead and relax your jaw. And we're gonna find ourselves about 2 or 3 inches below our belly button. If it helps, you can put a hand here on your belly button, 2 or 3 inches below your belly button, but just really let yourself find your center, find the center of your body. Connect to the sensations there, and I'm gonna invite us right here to practice in our body's length. Like I'm literally gonna take the space out of my spine and I'm gonna move from any place of crunch to, I'm just gonna straighten and come all the way up into my vertical line. Maybe you can roll your shoulders back, but we're gonna get present in our vertical line. And when we get present in our vertical line, the metaphor that we get to be with, or the narrative that we get to live inside of, is dignity. I get to dignify this body by being in my vertical line. And from this place, I get to access a sense of my own inherent worth. Length, dignity. And right here, in whatever language makes sense for you, just take a moment and affirm your dignity. Affirm your inherent worth. And let that live along your vertical line. Good. And just notice what becomes possible when you get to move in the world from an inward, internal knowing of your inherent worth and your dignity, that your body can take the shape of that. Good. And now I'm going to invite you all from center. Let's move out to our edges, left to right and width. And one way I do that is I'll just pat down the sides of my body. Just like, oh, that's me. This is my body. This is my body. And in width, I can imagine if there's a scroll in the center of my body, I can unfurl that scroll to come out to my edges. Literally, I've got a left shoulder and a right shoulder and all the space in between. Come out to your edges and width. Take a deep breath into your ribs and let there be space sideways in your ribs. Feeling for the width of your hips. I can feel the width of my throat. If I come out to my edges in my throat, I make more room for the power of my voice to come forward. Width. And here we get to remember the truth of our interdependence. Yeah, this life will often push us into isolation, into self-reliance, and that's not the truth of who we are. We are interdependent. So in width, I get to reclaim my right to take up space, to belong, and to both give and receive the support that I need and I know that others need. I get to find that in width, surrendering to the truth of interdependence. And in width, let yourself just feel, who claims me? Who do I claim? Who do I belong to? Who belongs to me? And then breathe into that. Then we're going to invite you all to get present front to back in your body. So go ahead and feel for sensation on the back side of your body. That may be the sensations of your shirt on the back of your body, or if you're sitting in a chair, the sensations of the chair at the back of your body, or you can feel for air or your hair at the back of your neck. But start to connect with the back of your body. Put a hand there, touch your back if you need to. But wake up the back of your body, facing into the past. In this moment, we can call forward our accomplishments. We can call forward our competencies, the things that we've moved through that has gotten us here to this moment. And under any kind of pressure, we can remember ourselves and rest back into that. Good, and just take a moment and let yourself get present with the back of your body and all that's your inheritance here. And then we're going to get present in the front side of the body. Maybe we can just do that by doing a few taps on the front side of the chest. Maybe bring that down and do some tapping on the belly. And as we get present with the front side of our bodies, we make more space to be a relaxed, open presence in the face of what's coming out in front of us. Whatever's coming in the future, it's unknown. It's unknown, but we have more power to walk into that from a relaxed body than we do from a braced body. Good, so we practice getting present, relaxed, available in the front of us as we face into this wild reality that's filled with challenge and beauty. But from a relaxed body, we can meet that. Good, relax your jaw, and finally let something below your neck, maybe listening here in the area of your heart. Put a hand there if that helps you. Or listening here from the area of your gut. What do you care about? No shit, what matters to you? And don't overthink it. Let whatever arises here be the truth of what that is. What do you care about? What matters to you? And whatever answer arises here, let that answer, for the sake of that answer, I'm going to take up space in my length and be in my dignity. For the sake of that answer that came to me about what I care about, I'm going to take up space and width and know my right to be here, to belong, and to know the truth of my interdependence. For the sake of what I care about, I'm going to be in my depth, knowing that what I care about comes from a tale. It comes from something in my past that has made that important to me, and in service to my future, something out in front of me. And then take a moment here and just notice your mood. What is it to be a little bit more in you? From this place, we have a lot more agency. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to our next person. Thank you for being with us, and thank you for this moment to take some time to get more present in yourself.
right. Thank you, Mawu Lisa, for grounding us into the space. I want to give our facilitators an opportunity to introduce themselves and how they've been feeling in this current moment. I will start with, all right, can everybody on screen? Cool. I will start with Desi.
Hi, y'all. Good to be with you again. I'm feeling a lot more grounded, a little more spiritually rooted, a little more like spiritually tipsy. I'm trying to like lean into that. I actually feel a little like wobbly. I think I say grounded too much, but tipsy is good too sometimes when it comes to opening, right? So for the sake of access, I'm gonna describe myself. I'm a Black femme presenting person with long curly hair, wearing a denim blue shirt, and I'm sitting in an office in front of some bookshelves. And like many of you, I've felt a roller coaster of emotions over the last couple of weeks, a web of grief and rage and uncertainty, and also a lot of hope in seeing a lot of glimpses of the world we're trying to birth happening. I feel like the tensions of this moment have felt like witnessing contractions almost. And I'm gonna try to keep it short, but I've been holding space with chosen family and extended family here in Louisiana, in Los Angeles, and there's a lot of beauty and love and connection happening, and I feel grateful for all the opportunities I've gotten to be a part of that, and looking forward to seeing what happens next. And with that, I'll just go ahead and pass it to Crosby.
Hey family, I'm Crosby. My primary pronouns are they, them, and as a point of access, I'm biracial, Black, white. I have brown locks, and I'm wearing a gray, white shirt. Yeah, I really appreciate this space just to check in with one another before we dive deep. I've also been feeling like a really strange mix of emotions. It's really hard to define and pin down. Mostly, I've been filled with, deep grief and outrage at the loss of sacred lives of our family members and siblings. My challenge in my practice has been to try to stay present and open to all that is arising, to everything that's being unearthed, to all the lessons of this moment, ideally with a sense of curiosity and compassion. I've been moved in this moment by so many things. I'm moved by all the ways that we're building the bigger we. I'm moved by Black healing spaces, Black organizing spaces like Climate Justice Alliance's Black Caucus. I'm moved by all the wins, the big ones, the small ones, from the toppling of Confederate statues to the banning of chokeholds in over 20 cities. The global reach of this moment is certainly profound. And I'm just so grateful to be in solidarity with all of you in this moment as we build a world that we know is not only possible, it's necessary, it's long overdue, and it begins by ending the war on Black people and seeking repair for past and continuing harm. So I'm just so, so grateful. Thank you all.
Taj, you want to go next?
Yeah, thank you, sisters. Thank you. Taj James, here in the heart of Wakanda, in the Lonely Territory. An old Black man with a gray beard, sitting in front of a plant that needs some water. I'm realizing I'm not taking care of all my relatives well enough. as I see the plant behind me. Also in a denim shirt, like Sister Deseree. And also very grateful to be a part of this circle and to be connected to all of you in this moment as the world turns, as the world transforms with our courage and our love and our genius and our joy. And by remembering who we are and where we come from and listening to the voices of our descendants who are already speaking to us and telling us it's going to be all right and we're going to get through. And we're going to get through because we're going to get through together. And so, yeah, just grateful to be in the circle. Have to send special appreciation to Sister Michelle, who supported me in this conversation. She was originally the person in the collective who was going to share the words that I'm going to share. So I'm also here to represent the work and wisdom that she's developed, and so I want to appreciate her and her family and say thank you to all of you for joining in this journey.
Perfect. Thank you, everybody. Again, my name is Abbas, pronouns he, him. And just in this moment, currently has just been a mixture of emotions, like everyone has been having, a little bit like hurt and pain just from just watching all these deaths being televised. And then also just a sense of like I feel like there's an opportunity, like there's ways, there's opportunity for change, you know, because of like the mixture of COVID and folks not being at work, that I feel like people are more moved to see and also just have their eyes open to see what capitalism is doing to our people. And then at the same time, there's also just a bit of fear, just understanding that we are going against, like, we're going against folks with guns, you know, and there's a lot of folks who are, and it's not just the military, it's also just random folks in our neighborhoods that are, you know, doing lynchings. And I feel like there's just a sense of safety that I feel like we don't have. But definitely feeling like we have the opportunity to be able to do that and build something new. And with that, I want to give the participants an opportunity to somewhat introduce themselves, not completely because can't see everyone, but if everybody can drop into the chat, where are folks coming from? Like what area, what regions are people coming from? So just drop those in the chat. Okay, I see New York, we got Philly, San Diego, ooh, so fast, Los Angeles, New Orleans, New Mexico, downtown San Jose, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Boston, Toronto. We have all over. This is crazy. Denver, Portland. Wow. Thank you all for chatting that. Oh, somebody from Brazil. All right. So with that, I'm gonna pass it over to my colleague Desi, and she will go over the overviews from our and takeaways from our last session.
Cool. I'm gonna share my screen in just a moment. Get this going. Okay. Let's see here. Okay. Let me just make sure folks are on the right view. Okay, can everybody, or can one person tell me you could see the presentation, not the presenter view?
We see your presenter view, Desi.
You see the presenter view? Oh, I had it right the first time. All right, swapping it. Thank you. Appreciate your patience with the tech. Okay, so first, quickly, we're going to go over some key takeaways from our first session, and then I'm going to give a little preview of where we're going in the next hour and a half. So the first takeaway I want to remind folks of is that all economies are rooted in ecosystems. And because of this, we know that how we as human communities get our needs met create either reinforcing or balancing feedback cycles. And those cycles have good or bad consequences. So the second takeaway, these feedback cycles can lead to either dynamic balance or collapse of ecosystems. And then we looked at how the capital flows, or global finance capital, is creating certain feedback loops that are driving pandemics and ultimately ecological collapse. And the fourth major takeaway is that we need to create feedback loops that protect and restore the web of life that we're a part of, including the microbial life of pathogens. And we spent some time talking about that hidden world together. And then the last takeaway, which we're going to expand on today and moving forward, is that to shift the way that we manage home, or the way that we do economy, we as translocal movements need to move from simple solutions to strategic interventions that address the root causes of the problem and create new conditions and opportunities towards the shifts that we need. So today, we're going to look at, for session 2, translocal interventions for a just recovery. First, we're going to start with the just transition framework, from banks and tanks to caring and cooperation. Abbas and I will lead that. And then Taj is going to take us through some just transition principles and strategies on how we get there, restoring land, labor, and capital to self-determined communities. And then we're going to have some special guests, going to keep some surprises, so get ready. And then we're going to talk more about interventions from COVID-19 to just recovery and not creating eco-apartheid. And then we'll wrap it up with a Q&A, shout out to the study groups for this session, and go over some next actions together. So with that, we'll jump into the just transition framework. But first, we have a poll just to see folks' familiarity with this framework. So Ellen, if you want to pop up the poll. So if y'all can go ahead and type in your answers, I'll give everyone a minute just to know, have you seen the just transition framework but never seen it presented before? Have you seen a presentation of the framework before? Or is this totally new for you? You've never heard of the just transition framework at all? So we'll give folks just one more minute to put in your response, and then we'll take a look at results, and it'll help us as we go through it. Just get a sense of folks' familiarity with the framework. Okay, last one. Let's see the results. Okay, wow, we have a majority of folks on the call who've never, at least in the Zoom poll, have never heard of or seen the just transition framework, 41%. All right, so we'll lead you through it. This is going to be a little more condensed version than what we usually do, but we'll get us grounded in this shared framework together. So with that, I'll hand it over to Abbas, who's going to start us off.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Desi. So as folks may recall from session number 1, that economy is how we organize ourselves in the place we call home, how we manage the many aspects of community and family life or home. We are referring to this whole process of organizing or managing our lives in our home as economy. So every economy is made of 5 core elements. Life sources, commonly referred to as resources, human labor or work. And what we mean by work, we mean all activities of everyday life which involve the life source. These 2 are combined and applied towards the purpose of the economy. And then we have cultural worldview. This makes the economy make sense to the people who participate in it, and it sets the limits of what's acceptable and what's not. In fact, that culture and worldview, the language, stories, practices, rituals, evolve in dynamic relationship with the other core elements. And lastly, we have governance, and this facilitates the smooth function of the economy towards its purpose. Depending on the kind of economy, these core elements can be very different. We're going to look into what these core elements look like in the extractive economy, like today's dominant economy versus the regenerative economy we are actively building for our future generations. So we're going to start with purpose. The primary purpose of the dominant economy, what we call the extractive economy, is the accumulation, concentration, and enclosure of wealth and power. Despite what it may claim, the purpose of a system can only be determined by what it actually does. While those who control the dominant economy, namely the global 1%, their corporations and government friends, may claim and even believe that the purpose of the economy is to serve everyone or eliminate poverty or create opportunities, the simple fact is that this has not been the result of the basic formula of this economy. Let us not forget that the extractive economies like US capitalism actually were designed to do what they are doing. These claims serve the need to control people's response to systematic oppression. Therefore, these claims do not really define the purpose of the economy. The purpose of a system can only be determined by what it actually does. Therefore, we must reasonably conclude that the purpose of the dominant economy is the concentration and the enclosure of wealth and power regardless of consequences. Some of the consequences of the extractive economy are chattel slavery, genocide, forced separation of people from their land, and the total destruction of the biological and cultural diversity upon which our collective survival depends. So resources or life sources, how are they obtained in the extractive economy? So natural resources are extracted by forced removal from their rightful place in a living system. They are treated as limitless and without regard to other parts of the ecosystem that have an interdependent relationship with them. How is work treated and how is human labor organized in an extractive economy? So for work, specifically human labor, is a particularly precious renewable resource. But an extractive economy is exploitation. All life takes energy from the sun, converts it into energy to carry out all of our life's activities and our work. As humans, when our work is in right relationship with the living world, in dynamic balance with the ecosystems upon which we depend, it remains a renewable resource. It is through exploitation that our work is converted from a renewable resource into a non-renewable resource. In the extractive economy today, we are expected to divorce our values, our deepest sense of what is right and wrong, from our labor. We work from paycheck to put a roof over our heads and food on our table if we're lucky. To meet these needs under this system, people are willing to do almost anything. This is why we say that human exploitation enables ecological erosion. Exploitation has taken many forms, from chattel slavery to wage labor, from child labor to devaluing the labor of caring for each other. So what kind of cultural worldview is there to legitimize this purpose? So we use the umbrella term, colonial mindset, but all of those is the myth of white supremacy, heteropatriarchy, and consumerism. So colonial mindset is, you can get a degree unpacking this, but basically this is the umbrella concept that speaks to the ways that white supremacy and cis heteropatriarchy are these core elements that shape us on a systemic, personal, interpersonal level, and are rooted in centuries of colonial violence. Consumerism, if the purpose of the economy is endless accumulation, the people must be convinced to buy into the idea to measure our worth based on our many accumulations. The only way to be happy is to buy happy. The culture of an extractive economy is culture of life without limits. The idea that we can keep growing indefinitely without any ecological or social limits. If the worldview is what makes the economy make sense to people who participate in it and set the limits of what is acceptable, then we can clearly see, taking the US as a prime example, how heteropatriarchy and white supremacy have led to the invisibilizing and undervaluing the contributions of women and gender expansive people, and how the state permits innocent Black lives to be taken at the hands of a white law enforcement without any true consequence. So what is the form of governance that we use here? So we do not live in a democracy with a problem of militarism. Rather, militarism is the defining feature of governance in the extractive economy. While a culture of complicity, comfort, and
Say that again. Say that. Say it again. Say it again, brother. Say it again.
So we do not live in a democracy with a problem of militarism. Rather, militarism is the defining feature of governance in an extractive economy. While a culture of complicity, comfort, and consumerism can go a long way in ensuring the willing participation of people, there are always limits to mind control, as we're seeing now. And at some point, people are gonna resist. People have always resisted in disposition of their land and the deconstruction of their lifeways. Indigenous people from the Niger Delta to the Arctic Circle to Standing Rock have organized to protect their sacred lands, just as working class Black and brown families in urban centers are organized to protect their neighborhoods from police violence, gentrification, and have always been met with violence. So I'm going to pass it over to Desi, and she's going to talk about what kind of economy we want to build onto for our future.
You're on mute, sis.
Thank you. Sorry, I have too many mute buttons going on. So let's talk about the regenerative economies that we would like to build. For those of you who've seen this before, but maybe not in a while, the regenerative economy is a spiral image now, because we've realized that what we're moving towards isn't going to be a linear formula, but will be something iterative and dynamic, echoing what we shared in session 1 on our approach to complex problems, right? So at the center of regenerative economies, we have to start with a culture and worldview shift, because part of what helps us live regeneratively and imagine what that could be is taking guidance from the wisdom of our ancestors, who have shown us that there are so many other ways of being in relationship with each other and with the planet, right? Both pre-colonial and current indigenous economies embody social and ecological balance, and we want to build a culture that is rooted in that. So the culture of the regenerative economy must be one based on caring and sacredness. The sacredness of the relationships to each other and the world that we depend on. This is a culture where love and humility and mystery guide us instead of entitlement and arrogance. It's a culture in which we see ourselves as a part of and not apart from the living world. And it also demands, as the Zapatistas proclaim, a world where many worlds fit, right? To hold that complexity and embrace that complexity that we talked about in our first session so much. So the purpose of regenerative economies has to be ecological and social well-being. And this is our full working definition of the purpose. So the purpose of the regenerative economy is ecological restoration, community resilience, and social equity. Given the scale, pace, and implications of the ecological crisis, we must realign the purpose of the economy with the rhythms and the cycles of Mother Earth. I'll put up the Spanish translation of that, and elaborating on those 3 elements. By ecological restoration, we mean it's the process by which we take our labor out of the chains of the market and apply it towards preserving and promoting biological and cultural diversity. Biocultural diversity is the key indicator of the health and the well-being of the earth and the people. And then community resilience is the process by which we create the conditions for the maintenance of that diversity in the face of disruption. And we must make social equity a primary purpose of the economy if we are to address the existential threat posed by ecological crisis. As Abbas said, social inequity is a form of ecological imbalance and will inherently lead to ecological erosion. So what it comes down to is what you do to the land, you do to the people, and what you do to the people, you do to the land. This is why we cannot separate social equity from ecological restoration. So in our new economy's vision, what does our relationship to our life sources look like? How are they obtained? If we agree with the purpose, it's through regeneration, right? We can build rather than deplete soils. We can relate to forests and rivers and ecosystems in ways that provide for our needs, but at a scale and a pace that's aligned with living systems and what those cycles need to continue to function well. Right? How do we organize with the water cycle, the soil cycle, the matter cycle? And then how do we organize our human labor around that? How is work treated in this new vision of economies? Our work must be organized through democratic and voluntary cooperation rather than coercion and exploitation. So when we freely apply our labor together to meet our needs and solve our problems, we will both liberate the soil and ourselves. And when we say work here, we're not just talking about our jobs, right? Our work means all the different roles that we play, from caregivers to carpenters to healers, to plumbers, to artists, to farmers, to elders, to our sweethearts, to warriors, right? How do we value all of the different forms of work that we do, from just breathing and moving our heartbeat? How do we value that? We can no longer afford to indulge in the crude reduction of the great power of our work to simply being a job. And lastly, the form of governance that is the feature of our regenerative economy. Governance, governance, governance. It looks like collective determination, right? And collective determination will take diverse forms in every place, but at the core of it, what we mean is that people and communities are in control of the decisions that affect their daily lives, from where they work to how they collectively share life sources within and between places and across different scales. Another feature of regenerative governance is that the primary decision-making happens at the smallest scale appropriate to what we're trying to govern. So different arenas of governance demand different boundaries. So water should be governed at the watershed scale, where everyone who relies on that watershed has some say and participation in how that watershed is cared for. A food shed would be governed in a much different way than a community safety shed or various types of workplaces, right? But at the core of thinking about this idea is, how do we start using natural boundaries and not arbitrary political borders that fragment our ecosystems and communities, and actually give way to more permeable and flexible and socially and ecologically defined ways of thinking about the boundaries of what we govern. So reimagining and realigning the very shape of governance with living systems is a key feature of a just transition. So knowing that this is what our communities need is one thing, but supporting our people in transitioning from there to here, from extractive to regenerative, is another thing, right? It's a process that we've not yet experienced, but we're witnessing many beautiful ways folks are moving in this transition. So with that, I'll close with just a few quick glimpses of some of the different ways communities are using and adapting this just transition framework. And we can share some follow-up links about these projects later, but just a few quick images. This is from Native movement in Alaska, the reimagining of the regenerative economy into indigenous economies. This one is from Idaho Rising in Idaho, with a lot of beautiful spiral images, lots of colors, transitioning from a decaying worldview to an emergent worldview. And this last one, and I apologize for the blurriness, I couldn't find a bigger version of this, but this one is from Urban Tills in Richmond, California, a just transition vision around housing for the North Richmond Tiny Home Eco Village. So with that, I'm going to close this part and hand it to Abbas, but we're going to get into a set of just transition strategies in a minute to look at how we're moving towards this vision.
Perfect. Thank you, Desi. Before we get into that, we're going to go on a quick break. So just a quick 3-minute bio break. Use the bathroom, grab some water. If you need to handle any other personal business, take time to do that. And we're going to come back with a cultural opener.
We just want to party, just go. We just want to party, just go. Just breathe. We gotta dance, dance and breathe. We just want to party, just go. We just want to party, just go. Just breathe. We gotta dance, dance and breathe.
welcome everyone back from break. Before we get into more content, we have a special guest, special cultural offering coming from Tongo. He's originally from San Francisco. He's a poet, a movement worker, an educator. His latest curriculum on extrajudicial killings from Black people, We Charge Genocide Again, has been used as an educational and organizing tool throughout the country. His book titled Somebody's Dead Already has nominated for a California Book Award. His latest book, Heaven is All Goodbyes, was published by the City Lights Pocket Poets series, was shortlisted for the Griffin Poetry Prize and won a California Book Award and an American Book Award. So without further ado, I want to welcome Tongo.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good to be with y'all. I go to the railroad tracks and follow them to the station of my enemies. A cobalt-toothed man pitches pennies at my mugshot negative all over the United States. There are toddlers in Iraq. I see why everyone out here got in the big cosmic basket and why blood agreements mean a lot and why I get shot back at. I understand the psycho-spiritual refusal to write white history or take the glass freeway. White skin tattooed on my right forearm, ricochet sewage near where I collapsed into a rat-infested manhood. My new existence is living graffiti. In the kitchen with a lot of gun cylinders to hack up, house of God in part, no cops in part, my body brings down to Christmas. The new bullets pray over blankets made from the old bullets, pray over the 28th hour's next beauty mark. Extrajudicial Confederate statue restoration, the waistband before the next protest poster. Hey, by the way, time is not an illusion, Your Honor. I will save your deaths for last. You are witty, Your Honor. You're moving money again, Your Honor. It's only raining one thing. Non-white cops and prison guard shadows reminded me of spoiled milk floating on an oil spill. The neighborhood making a lot of fuss over its demise, a new lake for a Black Panther party. Malcolm X's ballroom jacket slung over my son's shoulder, the figment of village, a new news to a new white preacher, all in an abstract painting of a president. They bought slavery some time, didn't it? The tanted screeches of military boats and election Tuesday cars, a cold-blooded study in leg irons inside your body, leg irons inside a tornado shelter. I mean, proof that some white people have actually found the nooses. The sundown couples made their vows of love over opaque peach plastic and boat action audiences. The Medgar Evers second is definitely my favorite law of science. Final news clippings and primitive Methodist, my arm changes imperialisms. Simple policing versus structural frenzies. Elementary school script versus even white spectrums. Artless bleeding and the challenge of watching civilians think. And terrible rituals they have around the corner. They let their elders beg for public mercy. I'm gonna go ahead and sharpen these kids' heads and their arrows myself to see how much gravy spills out of family crest. Modern fans of war with their t-shirt poems, the t-shirt guilt, and me having on the cheapest pair of shoes on the bus. I had no choice but to read the city walls for signs of my life. A tour guide through your robbery, he also is. Cigarettes saying, look what I did about your silence. Ransom water and box spring gold, this decade is only for accent grooming, I guess. Ransom water and box spring gold, the corner store must die, war games, I guess. All these tongues from his junk. The start of mass destruction begins and ends in restaurant bathrooms that some people use and other people clean. You telling me it's a rag in the sky? Waiting for you, yes. We've written a sin, we set a stage, we should have fit in. Warehouse jobs are for communists, but now more corridor and hallway have walked into our lives. Now the whistling is less playful and the barbed wire overcrowded too, my dear. If it is not a city, it is a prison. If it has a prison, it is a prison, not a city. When a courtyard talks on behalf of military issue, all walks take place outside of the body. Dear life to your left, a medieval painting to your right. None of this really makes an impression. Crop people living in thin air. You have 5 minutes to learn how to see through this breeze. When a mask goes sideways, barbed wire becomes a floor, barbed wire becomes a roof, 40 feet into the sky becomes out of bounds. When a mask breaks in half, mind which way the eyes go. They killed the world for the sake of giving everyone the same backstory. We're watching Gary, Indiana fight itself into the sky. Old pennies for wind, for that wind feeling you get before the hood goes up and over your headache. Pennies that stick together, mocking all aspirations. Stuck Together Pennies was the first newspaper I ever read, along with the storefront dwelling army that always lets us down, where the Holy Spirit favors the back room. Souls in a situation that offer 100 ways to remain a loser. Souls watching the clock, hoping their eyes don't lie to sad people. What was we talking about again? The narrator asked the graveyard, a 10 minutes flat, said the graveyard, the funeral only took 10 minutes. Man, never tell that to anyone again. You just gonna pin the 90s on me? All 30 years of them? Then why should I know the difference between sleep and satire? The pyramid of corner stores fell on our heads. We died right away. That building wants to climb up and jump off another building. These are downtown decisions. Somewhere on this planet, it's August 7th, and we running down the rest thinking one more needs to come with me. What evaporated on Earth? so that we could be sent back down, a conductor of minds in a citywide symphony, waving souls to sing. He also is. I'm off to make a church bell out of a bank window. Kitchens meant more to the masses back in the day, and before that, we had no enemy. Somewhere in America, the prison bus is running on time. You want to lose your job before revolution hits. Somewhere I won't be home for breakfast. Everyone out here now knows my name, and I won't be turned against for at least 4 months. You know, the cop in the picket line is a hardworking rookie. The sign in my hands is getting more and more laughs. It says the picket line got cops in it. I can take care of those windows for if you want, but someone else got to go inside your gas tank. It was clear to me that rich people had talked too much this year. And why don't you go ahead and throw down that marble park bench everyone's looking up at? You know, get the Romans out of your mind. It may be a good night's sleep, but it changed the last 20 years of my life, playing the instruments like punching the wall. What would you have me do? Replace the population, get brotherhood back to the winter, stop smoking cigarettes with the barely dead. You know, they listen in on the Sabbath. Police called the police on me. There was a white candlestick beneath my detention. I ruined the soup again. Thought the judges, he took off his pilgrim robe behind the white people's door and more. I didn't get lucky. I got what was coming to me. He toast. Hey, fight me back, the man said, you know, of course, to himself, washing windows with a will to live. Tin can on his left shoulder, enjoying the bright, brand new light with all party goers, both supernatural and supernaturally down to earth. Hey, what is this elevator traveling side to side? Like 1,000 bit of Polaroid pictures that you actually try to eat all the furniture on the street, nailed to the cement, cheap furniture, but we have commitment. This morning, an essay opens the conversation between enemies. Why? Because you control every grain of processed sugar between here and the poor man's border. Because in the tin can on my left shoulder, I can hear the engines of deindustrialization. You know, you should get in the painting. Tell lies more deeply. Hey, this month I'm rooting for the traitor, carting cement to my pillow. Here we will build. I'm high again, not talking much. And once you climb up the organ pipe to our apartment floor, I'm high again, calling everything church, singing along to a choir, thanks to a horn player's holy pass. I'm just putting a real jacket on it, you know, talk about a real 5 years. Keep memories like these in the pocket next to the tow receipt. That man lost a wager with the God of good causes. You know, stood up for himself a little too late. See, maybe too early. I can still see 20 angles of his jaw zigzagging through the cold world of deindustrialization. There's an art to it. I will tell my closest friends one day, I talk facing away from the dead. They replaced me with the change in my pocket, a penny that's yet to be invented. They say you have to know how to cut a throat on the way to cutting a throat. After sleeping on a mattress made from 2 garbage bags of clothes, I became content with the small gestures of plantation fires. I mean, playing with couch ashes, I realized how weird the universe was. It exists in so many places, so many random things. It interrupts me while I'm trying to dream. Like your clay correspondence, Lord. To be transparent, I have 20 books next to a bullet, like an old man giving me advice at the beginning of a revolution. I mean, I've really done it, Lord. Explored the mothers of my mind, explored what's naturally there, and I found no brainwashing. I found Africa, Lord. I have a future. It takes place in the diasporic South. I have morning possessions, modern militancy. I mean, windows to the South. I'll walk on a missile for food. I guess you will not want flowers for a few years, Lord. Will I be time face to face with the country I murdered? Merge with us, Lord. Our old metal versus new metal. Our old metal versus a pool of meandering imperialist faces. A multiculturalism of sorts. The dead replaced me with a comedian's chest cavity. Instead of a chest cavity held tight, it takes a violent middleman for me to talk to myself. Stories that travel through other people's stories. A song about a song, a hemisphere about a hemisphere. Stories that travel through a conquered poet. You know, my mother remembers Africa, Lord. She killed on behalf of you, Lord. I wore a machete all winter and no one asked me what it meant. I read 1,000 books in front of the world. What I do is fight poems and sleep through decadent San Francisco prayer circles and watch people play for post-working class associative services or, you know, recreations of a governor's desk, a ruling class art of utility playing find a sociopathic bureaucrat, a day some white people scared even easier. TV in a basket next to a ceramic baby wearing ceramic armor, musket progeny fantasizing through the art of the poor. Their trendy latches locked before God. Black art hunted down like a dog. And hand over my friends, Lord. Lord, I think I'm going to die in a war. Unelected white people in my small house like a blue song with no spiritual effect, or dollhouse H-bomb, a pony show near dead bodies, apartheid, weddings that go right, apartheid, white people who give birth to mathematicians, the spiritual continuity of barracks and police stations, the chemical interpretation of a Sunday trip to church, church smells in their pockets, a river mistaken for a talking river, no autobiography outside of small personal victories of violence and drug use, made in the image of God's trinkets, what white abolitionists confided in their children about chemical assurances that they will switch from black artists to white artists, black guy to white guy, black worker to white worker. I think about you cautiously, Lord. In the same way I think about my childhood, Lord. Foxhole Friday nights, most of life is me. I mean, a comedian points out a planet's field to a priest. King Sugarcane, King Cotton, King Revolutionary, the Bible Central, containing all modes of shallow introduction, introducing an unlisted planet class, speaking about fevers and balance sheets and reassuring the masses that we can figure out our fathers later. You know, a priest took my mother lightly, Lord. Stood in front of parishioners, re-raveling fantasies about black art. Priest reading confidently before I broke him and broke his parallel. After the day I've never been a poet before. A little brother watches his big brother's friends. They leave rifles on shelter walls. They agree with me and call it literature. You know, it's a simple matter, this revolution thing. To really lie to no one, to keep nothing godlike, to write a poem for God. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Tongo. Thank you so much for blessing our space. That was amazing. That was really amazing. It's my first time meeting this brother. And that was just amazing, bro. Like, definitely want to share. And if you have like some links to send out.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Much love to you and much love to all. I'll drop my little name in the chat or something like that.
All right, perfect.
All right. Much respect.
All right. With that, we're going to get into the content and I'll pass it over to Taj.
Whew. Decolonization is by definition, a process of imagination and memory. And the artists and the poets have a special responsibility in that, to remind us who we are, to help us remember who we are, and to help us reimagine who we can be when we know where we come from. So I am just sitting with the offering that was just made by Brother Tongo, and just I'm gonna have to go back and listen to that a few times, because it's the DNA of the future is there. The past, the present, and the future, it's all there. And so just thanks and gratitude to the artists and the healers and the mystics for helping us find our way. So I've been tasked with helping to think about what can we do right now in this particular moment, and what moment are we in? And so I wrote something a few years ago that it kind of guides me in this process, because I think as you saw in the Just Transition framework that Moving Generation has developed in co-creation with the community of frontline leaders that are making this work real in the places where folks live, is that this process is a spiral process. It's not a linear process, and time moves forward. So there's some things we have to bring to that and find within ourselves to move in a good way. So the work that I do, I think about as like in the context of full spectrum, and I'll tell you a little bit about what that means for me. So it occurred to me that every binary is a spectrum, and every spectrum is a wheel, and every wheel is a web, and every web is a spiral, except when it's not. So on the road to awareness, default to complexity and paradox. And I say that because those are words that came to me, and I come back to them because this framework, this approach is very rich. It has a lot in it. I mean, I've spent many years, and I'm still learning. Every time I look at it, I learn something new. And as you can see, it's evolving because it's a co-creation of a community of folks who are learning these principles and applying these principles in practice. So we have to hold that energy and that recognition of the mystery and the paradox in it. But the question that we're asking is we're going to dive into this question of like, what is a regenerative economy? And what can we do in this moment in history, this unique moment in history, to help bring that economy forward? And I'm going to share some images and see if we can get this this thing moving. All right. So let's see here. There is my screen, but you don't want to see this. You just want to see this. Wait, how do I, let me see. I'm trying to figure out how to just see what's there. Well, I think that'll work. So one of the wonderful things about this moment is the folks who've been doing this work have been preparing for this moment in history. And the Climate Justice Alliance, It Takes Roots Coalition, People's Action brought their community together to really talk about what it would take to build a regenerative economy. And they've recently offered this playbook for all of us. And it lays out in a lot of detail, there's very specific principles and policies and practices that we need to be implementing right in this moment to move this regenerative economy forward. So we're gonna touch on some of those things, but I think for those of you who are looking into the basket for the seeds, there's a lot of seeds in this basket. It's quite a gift and quite an offering. I'm still making my way through it myself, but it's a huge resource as we go into this conversation. And we try to imagine ways this might unfold and how we can create a true economy of care that honors the sacredness of all things. So Sister Ancestor Grace Lee Boggs asked the question, what time is it on the clock of the world? And the Just Transition framework allows us to think about where we are in history. And one of the important things that the framework offers is the notion that you know, the system that we're in, the system of what global white supremacy and racialized capitalism and is in fundamental crisis for all the reasons that we understand. And the insight of the Just Transition framework is, can we consciously as a human family in relationship to our other relations, to all beings, advance a conscious and intentional transition towards something different, something new? Because if we don't accelerate a transition, then what we're going to be faced with is a collapse. And in the context of a collapse, the systems that are both harming us, that we are also dependent upon. You know, I think about the families that live, you know, not far from here, who live in the shadow of the Chevron refinery. And many of those families, you know, they got people in their families who can't breathe because of the asthma that comes from living in the refinery, and they've got other folks who work in the refinery. We are both harmed by and dependent on the systems that we live in. And Just Transition is about how we can accelerate transition before collapse, so that we can mitigate the harm and lessen our dependencies on these collapsing systems as we shift to community-controlled systems that are more resilient in the face of the political, ecological, economic sort of shocks that are going to come. And there's a real question right now of whether we are economically, this economic system that we're in, whether we are in a global recession, which we've probably been in for about at least 6 years, whether we're going into another Great Depression, or whether we're actually heading for a real collapse of the economic system. And, you know, if you read the economists from across the political spectrum, most of them will say we're pretty close to depression, and collapse is possible, because this system right now, the only thing that's holding it together is violence, is the militarism and violence that are the foundation of it, because it can't actually meet people's needs. It's produced so much ecological instability and so much inequality that the only way to hold it together is violence. It's done, it's finished, it's over. And so what the COVID moment made possible, and what this global upsurge in the Black liberation movement has made clear, is that this system is done. This system is through. But that doesn't mean that what comes next is necessarily liberatory. And so we have this question of, are we going to shift into a just recovery, in which the vision for a restorative economy is something that we commit to and move forward into as a human family, or are we going to head towards eco-apartheid? which essentially is the deepening of the fascism, the militarism, the control that we're seeing rise in this moment as the system tries to hold itself together, as it loses the legitimacy because of its failure to deliver what it promises, because it's doing, as Abbas shared, like what it was designed to do. So so this notion of just recovery and collective self-determination, one of the things that we can do in this moment is sort of look to the lessons and the practice that's being offered by our comrades who've been leading the abolition work in the context of the prison industrial complex. Because what we can see in, for example, the demand to defund the police is the insight that's in the heart of the just transition framework, which is about starving the extractive system of resources and shifting those resources directly into community stewardship, community care, community control in ways that build resilience and community wealth. So we're going to be talking about the phases involved in that transition. So I was reflecting not that long ago and realized that kind of like in between the state and the market is the community and the commons. And this is a picture of time. This is sort of maybe the last, humans have been around for about 300,000 years. Agriculture, settled agriculture for about 12,000 years. About 5,000 years ago or so, this cultural idea emerged, right? That human beings, an idea that no one had really ever thought of before, or had not organized a society around, but this idea that human beings are separate from nature, and that human beings are superior to nature, and that humanity is masculine and nature is feminine, right? So that was a really bad idea, but you know, it hasn't been around that long, only 5,000 years or so. And so this visual, which Sister Michelle sort of put together, is a little bit of a representation of what grew out of that idea. And then about 500 years ago or so, that idea sort of mutated, because that lie of separation and supremacy got erased when this notion of race was invented and became sort of the organizing principle of a global system, which is, you know, pretty young relative to human history, but in a short amount of time has brought us to the brink of some pretty big difficulty. So what you see here is, when you think about like the transition that we're in, right? And you think about the question of shelter and housing and human settlement, right? For most of human history, human beings belong to the land. We just belong to the land. We were a part of everything else. And the notion that we were separate from it is not really something that occurred to anyone, because it's not true. But someone said, no, we have dominion. We are separate, superior. We have dominion over the land, and we are white people, and we're excited about it. And we're gonna spread our ideas all over the world. And as a result of that, like now we live in a situation in which, like, if I want a place to live, someone's gotta own it, right? So I either own it or I rent it, right? And that's the market, right? Or I don't have a place to live and I'm houseless, right? Because this is not a system that provides housing for everyone that needs it. Or if I'm lucky and unlucky, I live in public housing, which is the housing that the state provides. And so the transition that we're making, what we're doing in this moment as sort of the portal, this portal is the sort of skinny space between the growth of the market and the growth of the violence of the state. And we're getting squeezed right in the middle of that little gap there. The work of the Just Transition movement is to shift resources so that our communities own the places that we live, and we own them forever. We own them in a way that they can't be taken from us, and the way that generally gets talked about is sort of taking housing out of the speculative market, right? But it's not just we're turning all housing into public housing projects. We are actually putting housing, we're organizing housing in a way in which we as communities can steward and govern that housing for our collective well-being and benefit, because we belong to our communities. We're here to protect and defend them and care for each other in the places that we live. So this work around building regenerative economy, restorative economy, if you just look at this example of housing, it kind of gives you a sense of like some aspects of the transition that we're moving through. And this is a quick visual if you think about where the money is at, right? So the money that's been extracted, a lot of it is in what we call the market. Some of it is, significant amount is controlled by the state, which most of us don't control the state, but it's controlled by the state. And then you've got some resources in the commons. You know, we've got our co-ops and our land trusts and indigenous people who still have stewardship over some of their own territories where they have stewardship. And then there's the bottom of this is kind of like family wealth or household wealth, right? And a lot of times in these conversations, we haven't really had a strategy to focus on growing the commons. And that's a central part of the just transition strategy, that we're not just shifting resources from the market to the state or from private to public. We're doing something a little more decolonizing than that. Maybe that's the right word. And so this is a vision of like, you know, in 30 years from now, what does it look like when the commons is a much sort of larger part of our experience, how we organize our economy? Folks still have household resources to care for what they need, but it's secondary to sort of shared and collective resources. And government is still there, but its function and its role is really community serving, right? Community serving communities, serving ecosystems, serving bioregions. So that's a little bit of a visual of kind of when we think about this process we're in and where this portal is taking us. So in this moment, you know, when we think about the lessons that are being lifted up globally around the simple demand around defund police, and at the heart of that is really, you know, what King talked about in his call for a radical revolution in values, the need to transition from a thing-oriented society to a people-oriented society, and that we have to transcend these triplets of racism, misogyny, extreme greed, and militarism, right? Because as the just transition framework lays out so powerfully, the violence is the system of governance. And if we don't divest culturally, politically, and economically from those systems of violence, then we cannot build the kind of economy that we need. That you have to confront that violence first. And as we can see, they understand that as well, that if they cannot persist in their anti-Black violence, their anti-Indigenous violence, their system will collapse, which is why they're violently defending it in the ways that they are. So, and similarly, we see Black liberation movements once again affirming that what needs to happen is that resources need to be taken out of militarism, state-sponsored, state-funded militarism, and put directly in the hands of communities so that we can care for ourselves and meet our own needs in ways that are restorative and regenerative. And that I think what that really illustrates with the strategic insight in this aspect of economic transition is that the transfer of financial resources, to transfer money out of police budgets and put it in the hands of community groups that are growing food and taking care of elders and doing what we need to do to keep ourselves safe, happy, and whole. That resource transfer is the power transfer. It is fundamentally a power transfer. And, you know, our partners at Climate Justice Alliance, one of the things that they've done to support this effort is build a whole initiative called Reinvest in Our Power. And through that work, communities that are moving the just transition framework are able to draw down and pull in different kinds of resources. As my teacher and sister, Amaka Agbo, who leads the Restorative Economies Project, has said recently, what this work helps us to do is disaggregate capital from capitalism, right? Meaning we generate all the wealth, other people take the wealth, but we've got to actually have very concrete and specific ways to take it back. And you know, they got it all kinds of places. You know, they got it in their offshore, their little offshore islands. They've got it. They just have all kinds of ways of taking the value that we generate, that workers and communities generate, and holding on to it pretty tight. And so so the Reinvest in Our Power is a strategy by which communities that are advancing this transition are really starting to reclaim those resources and take those resources back. And so I want to talk a little bit about the nature of our power, because what is so significant about the power that communities are building who are advancing the just transition towards the restorative economy, like what's so powerful about the approach is it's a transformational, integrated, and comprehensive view of power, right? Because it's focused first on the question of cultural power, which is primary. Cultural power tells us what's up and what's down, who's valued and who's not, what a human being is and what a human being is not, right? Cultural power is primary power, which is why folks are shooting people to try to defend statues of genocidal symbols of white supremacy, because what they understand is when the Columbus statues fall and when Breed climbed up that pole and pulled down that Confederate flag, and all these Confederate monuments are coming down, that they can't hold this system together without reasserting the dominance of that cultural power, without that lie. If the lie collapses, the system collapses behind it, which is why they're violently defending their symbols of domination, right? So the work that we're doing in our communities is telling our stories and being beautiful in all the ways that we are, in our poetry, in our art, in our storytelling, in our visioning, in our Afrofuturism, in our indigenous futurism. That is asserting a different cultural reality, which is foundational. This work also is about changing the rules and building the political power, but that is secondary to the economic dimension, because economic power is foundational, because there's no independent political power without independent economic power. And one of the things that our communities have been struggling with in the transition moment is that, you know, radical right-wing movements have had the benefit of a resource base, a funding base that's aligned with their radical and transformative vision. And for those of us who are working towards Buen Vivir, working towards beloved community, working towards restorative economy, we don't necessarily have a resource base that is supporting our mutual aid, supporting our political power, supporting our cultural assertion, right? And so one of the things that's so important about the work of the Reinvest in Our Power strategy is it's about putting resources into communities in ways that allow us to build and assert economic power in important and critical ways. Let me pause there, talking fast, take a breath. I don't need to say what's on here. I already said it. We'll move on to the next slide. But so the way that Sister Amaka, who leads the work around restorative economies, what I've learned from her in this work is that the economic transition is really about how we combine community ownership and community governance in ways that increase communities' capacity for self-determination, and our ability to advance the political, cultural, and economic power in an integrated way. And that integrated power is key to driving successfully the transition as a whole. So as I said before, this work around building restorative economies means we have to actually go out, find the money that they've taken from us, and actually like very systematically bring it back home. So where is it? How do we find it, right? Some of it is under your couch. Some of it's in your cushions of your couch, under your bed. Some of it you might have in the bank. If you're lucky, you got a pension or a retirement fund. If you're even luckier, you got a home and you own some of it, and they got an equity lot. So all of that money right now, which in the system that we have currently, it's not really set up. Things are not really set up for us to share as communities. Things are set up to share within our families, within the people that are chosen families, but things are not set up to make it easy for us to share. One of the things the COVID moment has done is started to help us build some of that muscle, because we've created these mutual aid mechanisms through which, like, if I get a stimulus check, I can put it in the pot, in the mutual aid pot, and the people who need it can pull money out of the pot, and we can start to pool our resources more cooperatively and collaboratively, and start to cooperate sort of beyond the boundaries of our families and chosen families. So a big part of what we have to do is realize the resources that we have available to us and figure out how to deploy those resources more cooperatively. Some of the money that is out there is in the foundations, right? And many of us who've been, who do work connected to nonprofits, we kind of depend on that work to do what we need, those resources to do what we need to do. We got to go get all that money, and not just the 5% in the grants, but the 95% that they've got invested in all the extractive economy. So the divest, reinvest work that folks have been doing for many years, both on militarization and ICE and private prisons and all of the horrible ways that people who say they're trying to help spend their money doing harm. And then there's all of the work in terms of fossil fuel investments and all the work around divestment. So that's been a key leverage point in our economic transition, is trying to get some of the money that says it's trying to do good to actually transfer those assets to community ownership and control. And we gotta, we gotta actually go after all of it too. So the bonds and the hedge funds and the equity funds and the offshore tax havens and the school bonds and the treasury, like, it all belongs to us, and we got to bring it all home. So that's kind of the theme of this slide here. So this, yeah, again, this process is fundamentally a process of like divestment and reinvestment. Let's see here. Yeah, I think I already touched on that. So one of the things that we can kind of imagine right now in terms of the part of the economy, the amount of resources that we hold in community in the commons, this little blue area here on the slide is a pretty small percentage of the financial resources that have been extracted overall. And so partly what we want to think about is over time, how does that shift start to look as we take resources out of Wall Street, out of big business, out of that, and we move it into communities, and we think about how to, using another phrase from Sister Amaka, disaggregate governance from government, because in many situations, because of our lack of economic power, our communities don't generally have control of the state. We don't have control over the political apparatus or the military apparatus, because we don't have enough economic power to assert that control. So there's a whole question of like, though the right wing has attacked government systematically as a way of attacking our communities, we both have to defend government and reclaim it as we build our cultural and economic power. So this is another way to visualize the time travel transition that we're in. If you think about what you can see from left to right is, essentially the extractive economy shrinking and disappearing, and then the work we're doing around cooperative community infrastructure and mutual aid sort of growing to be a bigger part of the economy. And then the public sector and the state essentially becoming a smaller dimension of our lives as well, as communities take on more responsibility for things that the state has previously managed. And we're sort of right now in this community wealth restoration period, this work of care and repair and transformation. And again, the people's orientation to regenerative economy is a really powerful playbook for the fruitful places to put our energy in this moment across different aspects of our lives. So this is kind of like another way to think about where we're going and what we're moving to, that we're transitioning to the buen vivir, to the beloved community, to the growth of the commons. And that's that's sort of essentially what the just transition framework is leading us towards. And there's the spiral evolution of our destination. One thing I wanted to offer is, one of the core communities that's a leader in this just transition movement are comrades from Cooperation Jackson, and they recently sort of laid out a formula, sort of talking about some of the core elements of activity that are needed in this moment. And what I found interesting about it is, and it kind of relates to the spiral, is that one of the challenges that the left has had in the last 100 years or so is that it's kind of white. Like, we think about things in a pretty linear, we think about time and progress in a pretty linear way. And what I really appreciate about the work that the Cooperation Jackson does is that within it, there's an assertion that the mutual aid, the food sovereignty, the cooperative economics, the community production, the self-defense, the people's assemblies, all of those capacities for self-governance, those are not transitional capacities. Those are foundational capacities, meaning we need to strengthen them now. And as we move towards more capacity to reshape the actions of the market overall and the state overall, that we need to continue to have our community power build and deepen through that transition. So I think there's a lot that they offer in terms of, in this moment, of like really important strategic guidance about how we take care of each other and stay safe as the violence of the state and racist vigilantes intensify, and how we think about where this is sort of taking us. So I think that's a really powerful iteration on the framework. And really the practices to build the regenerative economy are really the principles and practices that were shared in the first webinar. It's that by focusing on, committing to, and living into the building of social and ecological well-being, by honoring traditional ecological knowledge and the wisdom keepers who hold it, by promoting and protecting biological and cultural diversity, doing the work of healing and reparations, which that's the work right now, and we got to stop the violence before. It's hard to heal from the violence we've experienced when we're still experiencing more violence in the midst of everything that's going on, and yet that work must be done. And then the next gathering is about deep dive into bioregional governance. So just to sort of come back again around the spiral, the offerings that were made in the first webinar, those are really also the things that we need to build the regenerative economy. That's really what's at the heart of it. And in Espanol as well. So let's see here. And my comrades just interrupt me if it's time for our break. but because we've got some stuff coming in the middle of this, which is going to be fun, because there's a very specific toolbox that's being developed to move the specific pools of resources from where they are and put them in the hands of the folks who are really doing the work of care and repair. So let's see here. Decentralized. Yeah. Yep. Because the other principles, which I'll just name it before we go into strategic interventions, which the MG Collective has really helped us to all understand the importance of, is that with capital and capital as power, our task is really to democratize, decentralize, distribute, damper down our need to consume, and decolonize our relationship to money and what it is in the first place. So core to the transition to a regenerative economy is the sort of application of those principles. Yeah, and so next we kind of talk about some of the other key kind of strategic interventions evolving out of the resilience-based organizing models that MG's developed over the years with partners.
Hey, Taj.
Yep.
We're running a little low on time. We got like 9 minutes before 5. Do you mind if we do just a quick wrap up, and then we're gonna jump into a quick Q&A.
Okay, sounds good. Quick wrap up. So, okay. So, and I can't go fast. I can't go quick because we got to translate, but I will be focused and deliberate. So, as you know, we got to change the story we talked about with cultural power. It's happening. The statues are coming down. The symbols of white supremacy are falling. We've got to build this muscle of collective self-governance and self-determination over the things we need in our communities. We've got to build power by meeting needs and strengthen the mutual aid work that we're doing. The divestment and reinvestment we've talked about quite a bit in the context of decarceration. We need a red, black, and green New Deal. And there's specificity to each of those things. And we need to lift up the work that folks are doing right now. Folks in Greensboro who are doing this really interesting mutual aid model that I mentioned. We got to make sure that mutual aid, what happened in the Depression was when public works jobs were created, it kind of like demobilized the mutual aid infrastructure that folks had already built up. So we've got to make sure that as we get the state to take a bigger role, that it doesn't weaken community in the process. And then we got to, make sure we can have a place to live, cancel rent, and turn folks from renters into shared owners. And here's some folks who basically organized, some tenants to organize to become shared owners of the building that they were previously renters in. And there's powerful work happening right now around food aid and transitioning from aid to building regional food systems. And our partners in Puerto Rico are doing some amazing work right now in the context of COVID. And we've got partners in Denver who are, delivered over 300,000 meals to folks who are hungry across the Denver metro area, and doing it in a way that's based in a community-owned regenerative agriculture system. So, and we got farm workers taking over the farms, becoming the owners of the farms, and using their labor and their relationship to the land to drive community economic development in ways that really builds community power and thriving. So, yeah, so that's that. It's happening. We're doing it.
I appreciate you, Taj. Thank you so much just for the presentation. I hope all of our participants have gotten just a wealth of knowledge just from the session. We are running really low on time. We did want to have a little bit of time for a Q&A. We might have time for maybe one question. And then we're going to do a quick wrap up. So the first question that I have here is, we have different views and come together in consensus to move forward. Many people are concerned about POC falling into the divide and conquer tactic that is very much present now, as it has been for centuries. How do we firmly and lovingly let each other know enough when we see each other falling into the trap of oppression so that we move forward in a way that doesn't repeat the same mistakes?
Can you reread that, please? Sorry.
Yeah, I'll reread it one more time. So we have different views and come together in consensus to move forward. Many people are concerned about POC falling into the divide and conquer tactic that is very much present now, as it has been for centuries. How do we firmly and lovingly let each other know enough when we see each other falling into the trap of oppression so that we move forward in a way that doesn't repeat the same mistake?
Cool. Okay, I could start answering. Give you a little break, Taj, from talking. And I think what comes to mind for me is just the power of moving out of our silos. I think a lot of our work in our communities and in our organizations over the last decade or so has seen a lot of blossoming of getting out of the lane of, I work on racial justice, I work on economic justice, I work on environmental justice, I work on, I think the more in which we can get together and hold sacred space for folks to see and hear each other and to make connections and not comparisons, but draw the connections between all of the ways in which we're impacted by this system and all of the ways that we have come to resist this system, the more powerful movements we could create. I think one example that from this past couple of weeks is watching and listening to the footage of the American Indian movement taking down some of the colonial statues, and listening and watching the footage of Black activists and organizers around the world doing the same, and the power and opening of some of those spaces, and for the folks who have been building the intersectional movements that we need for a long time. So I think just continuing to know that we can't stay in our silos. We have to continue to hold each other, both respecting our journeys and also understanding the ways that they're connected.
Did you want to add anything, Taj, or you're good?
Yeah, no, I think that was powerful. I think, yeah, the only thing I would say is just folks are showing up for each other and showing up for Black folks in this moment in a way that I haven't seen before, and I'm grateful for that. And there are folks who are not. There are folks who are being invited to demonstrate their loyalty to white supremacy, and that's also happening in really painful and difficult ways. And I'm just grateful for the ways that folks are trying to the best of their ability, kind of work those things out within their communities. But I can see and I'm very grateful for the vast majority of folks who I see showing up in this difficult moment.
Right. All right, y'all. I think that's about time that we have for today. It's 4:59. We got a minute to spare. But I did want to just do a quick round of just thank yous and appreciations for our ASL interpreters, for our Spanish interpreters. And Yuki, are you still on? Did you want to show really quick your graphic recording?
It's on. She's on.
Okay, perfect. Also, just a quick thanks to Yuki. Also, a thanks to our poet, Tongo. Thanks to all the facilitators, Mawu Lisa. And we appreciate all of the participants for logging on and participating and contributing. The chat has been going and has continued going. And we have our next session coming up on June 30th, same time on a Tuesday, 3 o'clock. And we will be sending out the recordings most likely by like Friday this week. So we'll be sending out the recordings of the video along with the interpretation or the captioning. And there will also be like attached homework or any additional readings that you guys may need. And if anybody needs any other resources or videos to our previous session, please email us at, I'm sorry, at course correction or at course@movementgeneration.org. All right, thank you all.
Black is like the magic's like a spell. My brothers went to heaven, the police going to, yeah, they're going to. Hello, operator, emergency hotline. If I say that I can't breathe, will I become a chalk line? Up to see the movie, line up to see the act. The officers are scheming to cover up their Ask me no more questions, tell me no more lies. You're serving and protecting, is stealing babies' lives. I'm very black, 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 can't send me back, back, back. You take my brother, 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 I fight back, back, back. I'm very black, 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 I made a back, back, back. You take my brother, 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 I fight back, back, back.
Everything is everything. A mantra says a guillotine. A missionary commission misery into angel wings. And all he wanna do is be still and cut bread. Never know the dead how they whisper, forgive me. Everything is relative. Politicize the evidence. I heard a politician reiterate all the messages. And all he wanna do is feed family, be famous. Never know the poor how they scream out, redeem me. Everything is casualty. A song I heard the bullets sing. I know a couple babies gon' see him fly tonight. He wish he wasn't magic. All he wanna do is be a passage in the book titled America the Savage. Symphony and symphony, when everything was meant to be. Piano man and drummer boy just invented the song for me. And all I wanna do is find love and be happy. And all I wanna do is find love.
I'm very black, I'm very black.